Hi everyone, and welcome to this video on SSRIs, which stand for Selective Serotonin Reuptake Inhibitor drugs. Primarily, this video is going to go through how these drugs work, so their mechanism of action, their clinical indication, also their common adverse effects in reference to the 5 most commonly prescribed SSRI medications. Now, in addition to this, I'm also going to talk about briefly how the serotonergic, these are neurons that use serotonin as their neurotransmitter, project into different regions of the brain and their functions that they normally have, and how the neuron, the serotonergic neuron, processes serotonin as a neurotransmitter. So trying to get our head around how it might be effective or useful to know this information in the context of depression, and therefore the use of these medications that can help in this particular situation. All right, so let's start with this image over here. So it's an image of the brain. It's in a cross section. We're looking in to the side. It's very schematic, not detailed at all. So the serotonergic neurons I'm going to focus on in this region of the brain known as the brainstem, specifically the raphe nuclei. Now for the reason of this particular image, I'm going to call it the serotonergic hub. So this is where they are located, the serotonergic neurons. And when I speak about the serotonergic neurons, I mean the presynaptic neurons. So they're going to have their cell bodies here, and they're going to project to a wide range of different locations in the brain. But to make things a little bit simpler, I've put 4 different regions that they present to or reflect to and their functions behind it. So we've got over in this region of the brain, we've got the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. Then in a deeper structure, we've got the limbic system, so that like the amygdala, for instance. Then we've got the hypothalamus, which is important for the endocrine and the sympathetic nervous system. And then we've got the spinal cord, which is going down into the body. And that's important for processing sensory information, but also motor for movement. So within this hub, we're going to have these presynaptic neurons. So that's going to be their cell bodies. So how do we go about getting serotonin? Now, serotonin is what we call a monoamine. It's created from an amino acid known as tryptophan. Other monoamines would be dopamine and noradrenaline. So serotonin, sometimes also written as 5-HT, which stands for 5-hydroxytryptamine. So it's a big long word, 5-hydroxytryptamine, 5-HT, or serotonin. Now with serotonin, 95% of it is made in the gut by certain endocrine cells. So that's made in the gut and can be taken up by the peripheral nervous system. But when we talk about the central nervous system, so this is going to be in the brainstem, the only way that these serotonergic neurons are going to be able to make serotonin is they need to first create it from tryptophan. So tryptophan from our diet, I'll call it TP, tryptophan. It's an amino acid. It comes in from our diet. It then can cross the blood-brain barrier and enter into the brainstem, the raphe nucleus, or in this case, the hub, the serotonergic hub. So tryptophan will enter these neurons. Now, tryptophan has to be modified in 2 steps by 2 enzymes into serotonin, which I'll just call 5-HT. And the 2 enzymes are going to be TPH, tryptophan hydroxylase, and the second one is AADC, which is aromatic amino acid decarboxylase. So those 2 enzymes will modify tryptophan, that amino acid, into serotonin or 5-HT. Now, serotonin can't just sit in the cell as is because it would get degraded. So what has to happen is it has to get transported right to the end of the neuron, and this is where it's going to project to. Now, it has to get packaged up into a vesicle. So we're going to call that vesicle VMT2, or vesicular monoamine transporter 2, and that transports it all the way to the end of the axon terminal, which is now going to be in those different regions of the brain. So like the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, the limbic system, hypothalamus, and then down into the spinal cord. So here, the vesicles are sitting filled with their serotonin, waiting for a stimulus. So the presynaptic neuron in the hub gets stimulated from whatever reason. An action potential comes down the axon. We know about action potentials, sodium in, potassium out. Action potential comes down. We get to the end of the axon terminal. We need to exchange it for calcium. So now calcium comes in through its voltage-gated channel. In it comes, tells the vesicles to excitatose, so release the vesicles. That then means all these vesicles spill their serotonin. Serotonin goes into the synapse. And between the two neurons, the presynaptic and the postsynaptics are the neurons in these regions, and they're going to have an effect. But the serotonin needs to bind to their receptors. Now, the receptors are quite diverse. There's 7 different subtypes of serotonin receptors. Now, most of them are what we call G protein coupled, which means when they bind, they cause a secondary effect in the postsynaptic neuron. This could be excites it, could be inhibits it. It depends on the type of the receptor, the density of the receptor, the context of what this stimulation is all about. So there is diversity there happening. So once we get the activation of the receptor, it doesn't get locked onto that receptor forever. It needs to be taken off. And it's taken off by these Pac-Man looking cells, or enzymes or transporters, which we're going to call SERT. These are very important for today. SERT, serotonin reuptake transporters. This is where the SSRIs are going to block. They're going to block these transporters. But in any case, because we're just talking about physiology here, these are going to take the serotonin off the receptor, put it back into the neuron, and the neuron could do a couple of things. It could degrade it by another enzyme called a monoamine oxidase. So that's an enzyme that degrades it into some other metabolite, or it may repackage it back up into a vesicle, ready for another stimulation. In any case, this SERT is important because it needs to take it off the receptor to stop continually stimulating the postsynaptic neuron. Now, before we finish there, it's important to note that there are receptors also on the presynaptic neurons. So there's going to be some at this end, some at this end, which means the serotonin, as serotonin starts building up, it will feed back onto these receptors and almost turn it off or put the brakes on. So this is a kind of a negative feedback loop to say, if I'm overstimulating this neuron at this synapse with too much serotonin, these receptors will tell us to turn the presynaptic neuron off. So this is a good homeostatic turn-off mechanism. So this was going to be happening all the time for all of us. We've got the serotonergic neurons here in the hub, sending to the different locations of the brain, activating or inhibiting the postsynaptic neuron, which is going to have different effects in these regions. It's important to note that serotonin isn't an on or off switch. It doesn't just say turn on or turn off. It's actually a dimmer. It's either going to turn things up or turn things down. So it's more of a modulator. It doesn't cause things to happen. It could diminish them or inhibit them to some degree, or it could amplify it. So it's important to know that. So when we look in the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, this is important for executive functions. So this is going to be about having behavioural responses to certain stimulus. This is going to impact our coping mechanisms, our impulsivity, our memory, our learning, and things like that, and attaching associations with the memory. Particularly when we go into the limbic system, that's more about emotions or emotional context with the memory. So this will play around with our anxiety and our fear. It will put negative emotions with stimuli into that memory, so we can have aversions the next time we encounter certain things. When we look at the hypothalamus, this is about sleep and wake. This is about circadian rhythm. This is about feeding behaviours, our satiation, so how hungry we are, or how full we are, or our metabolism control. These are all driven by serotonin. Spinal cord, very big for pain. So serotonin can tell pain to turn up, make the pain state worse, or turn down, take the pain away. So all of this is already happening. These are already established pathways, but the impact that serotonin has on these locations or these networks is to either turn it up or turn down the volume, if that makes sense. So this is important for then when we move into mental health, when we start adding situations where we might have genetic predispositions, where we may have genes, because it's important to note that depression and other mental health disorders are generally called multifactorial, which have multiple causes behind them. One being genetic. So multiple genes may impact the processing way that the serotonergic neurons work. So maybe certain genes change the density of receptors, the type of receptors, the locations of receptors. So that's going to impact the way serotonin affects these. We also have the effect in the environment. So previous trauma, loss, death, things like this are going to impact the way that these neurons function, as well as certain neurobiological. So we have things like, are the receptors responding well to the stimulation by the serotonin? Sometimes the receptors may be incorporated in the membrane, and therefore they're not exposed to the serotonin. This is known as lipid rafts. So this is a theory for how depression may come about, or the inefficiency or the lack of the amount of serotonin in the neurobiology. All these theories could come about to why this processing isn't working as effectively as it could. So therefore, there may be negative effects in these processing. So we may start to have maladaptive responses in the limbic system. So instead of knowing when it's appropriate to put negative effects on our emotions, our behaviors, it may be switched on permanently. So we start to have more anxiety-like, fear-like, our mood starts to drop and it extends for longer periods of time, increased intensity, and start to impact in our everyday life. And this is what constitute what a depressive disorder is. It's intensity, duration, impact, and that's diagnosable. So therefore, the serotonin reuptake inhibitors is more about changing or blocking the transporter, therefore leaving more serotonin in the synapse. Now you would think by flooding the synapse with more serotonin, we're just going to make the person feel better. But what actually happens, the theory of what actually happens is when we use an SSRI like one of these and it blocks the SERT transporter, therefore more serotonin remains in the synapse. The serotonin goes back to the receptors, which we spoke about, and turns off the presynaptic neuron. So in the first few weeks, we actually see a stoppage of the presynaptic neuron. And this explains why the side effects to the SSRIs happen straight away. But as this presynaptic neuron has been turned off or turned down for so long, it starts to desensitize, which means that effect starts to change and it starts firing again, and firing potentially more, which then can help improve the symptoms associated with these different areas. And that's the theory for why or how the SSRIs work generically. We know that they block the transporter, but rather than just flood the synapse to kind of overstimulate the postsynaptic neuron, rather it goes back in the early few weeks. It starts to turn off the presynaptic neuron, but then it desensitizes and then it comes back with its activity. And then that in turn will have an effect back on the postsynaptic neurons. So when we look at the top 5 SSRIs, I'm going to go through them. I'm going to talk about what they're used outside of depression, because these can be all used in certain depressive disorders, but they can be used in additional clinical indications, how they're subtly different to each other, and some of the adverse effects to be mindful of. So the first one we've got is fluoxetine or Prozac. This was the first SSRI. Now, it can be used in addition to depression for things like bulimia nervosa, which is eating disorder, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, panic disorders, and bipolar. So when we look at it as an SSRI, it's the first SSRI that's used, and it's also the least specific. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's going to have an effect on the other monoamines as well. So not only serotonin, but also noradrenaline and dopamine. That then means some of its adverse effects can be a little bit wider. But when we look at its effect, it's also got the longest half-life. longest HL half-life. So that then means it could have a positive here that it's got decreased withdrawal symptoms. Now what that means is if a person abruptly stops using it, because the half-life could be 2 to 4 days, they're less likely to have impactful withdrawal symptoms. So that is a positive associated with that. In terms of some of the side effects, weight fluctuations is a big one. Now in some cases, the person, when they start taking this medication, they will lose weight, but then over longer periods of time, the weight can come back on. So the fluctuations is a better term here rather than weight loss or weight gain. Now, because it's affecting dopamine, noradrenaline, and serotonin, it can actually have more of an excitatory effect on the postsynaptic neuron, which means it can activate or overactivate some of these areas. So this could result in agitation, more anxiety, and insomnia, because we know that the hypothalamus is about sleep-wake. So in this way, it's going to cause more activation, so less sleep, more wakefulness. So some of the symptoms associated with that is through greater activation. And that's probably due to its effect on dopamine and noradrenaline as well. Moving now to sertraline or Zoloft. Additional to depression, it can be used for PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder, and social anxiety disorders. In addition to serotonin, it also increases dopamine through its blocking of its own transporter. And in terms of adverse effects, one of the largest one is to its impact in the gastrointestinal, specifically diarrhea. Now we know that serotonin is very abundant in the gut, so we can assume that there are many serotonin receptors in the gastrointestinal tract. So if we are using SSRIs and we are blocking the reuptake transporter, we know that we're going to have an effect on the receptors. So generically, one of the most common side effects or adverse effects of SSRIs are GIT upsets. So this could be diarrhea, constipation, nausea, vomiting, and it's likely due to the change or impact that has on these receptors. Moving to paroxetine or Praxil. Outside depression, this can be used in premenopause or perimenopause, so hot flushes, and also generalized anxiety disorders. Now this is the most potent of the SSRIs, which then means that the half-life is the shortest, therefore the withdrawal effects are going to be the largest, which opposes fluoxetine, which we saw has the least withdrawal side effects. It also is anticholinergic, which means it will block neurons that use the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. As a result, we see muscarinic-like side effects. So what we'll expect to see is dry mouth, constipation, confusion, or sedation. Now, due to its potency, it also can be teratogenic, which means it can have effect in the development, specifically the cardiovascular system in embryos. So its risk classification is higher in pregnancy, and due to the fact that serotonin is a signaling molecule in the development of the cardiovascular system. So it's important to note that that particular medication is the most concerning in reference to pregnancy. The next drug is Citalopram or Celexa. This can be used in major depressive disorders. Now, the main consideration here is the QT interval in the ECG. So it seems to affect the way that potassium is handled in the myocardium, which then causes an elongation of the repolarization period, which could lead to lethal arrhythmias. Last, we have escitalopram or Lexapro. Outside depression, it can be used for generalized anxiety disorders, and this is the most specific for SERT. So blocking SERT, it's the most specific, therefore it generally is considered having the least adverse effects in comparison to the other four or the other group. So as a quick summary, today we've covered where serotonergic neurons are located, where they project to, and the effects they have in different brain regions. We know that how serotonin is made, processed, stimulated, taken back up, its effect back on the neuron, how SSRIs work, what they block, so their mechanism of action, how they are proposed in their therapeutic, and then focusing on the 5 most commonly prescribed. How are they similar but different in their clinical indications and also their adverse effects.
Hi everyone, Dr. Mike here. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe. We've got hundreds of others just like this. If you want to contact us, please do so on social media. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Dr. Mike Todorovic, at DrMikeTodorovic. Speak to you soon.